Welcome to Latte with a Lawyer, a podcast dedicated to bringing you the stories of some of America's most successful lawyers, figuring out what makes them tick, how they creatively solve problems, and how others aspiring to be them can follow in their footsteps.
Okay, so listen, hey, today this is a new episode of Latte with a Lawyer. Today we have Larry Hall from Hollow Rooster, and great to have you with us, Larry.
Thanks, Jonathan. Happy to be here. Look forward to it.
So listen, just to kick this thing off, because it's the theme of the show, tell us what your favorite beverage of choice is to get started every day.
So at the moment, I'm just drinking a regular, good old office cup of Joe here in a Ohio Oyster mug. I'm relatively new to the coffee drinking world. Switched over from a bad Diet Coke habit back in November, but have ramped up quickly. My wife transitioned me with caramel macchiatos from Starbucks. And then transitioned to regular coffee. But then for Christmas, we got an espresso, which is fantastic. And so I'm now an espresso guy. So favorite Nespressos are the light blends, any of the light blends, anything under 7 in intensity is good for me. I'm not a true coffee drinker yet for the super dark stuff.
Excellent. Yeah, no, it's funny. I used to be a Diet Pepsi guy. I was addicted to it and I finally quit. But I think the first time I had coffee was a long time ago. We were in an office and I grew up drinking tea and there was only coffee. And it was like a habit just to keep going. It's more like psychological than anything else. You know, it's part of the routine. You just drink coffee all day. So
yeah, absolutely. You got to find something to replace when you're
give you a little mental break.
Yeah, exactly.
So anyway, I saw your background. It looks like you're a trucking guy. You're from the Midwest. Tell us about what you do and how you got started in this.
Yeah, so I am, my practice is 100% devoted to representing motor carriers. Most of the work I do is litigation based, where I either am hired by an insurance company or a motor carrier directly to defend them in litigation resulting from accidents. I also do a fair amount of work with motor carriers in terms of risk management, risk mitigation, policy and procedure review, things like that. So I'm kind of all things trucking for motor carriers, and that's what I've dedicated my practice exclusively to. Kind of a funny way, it's funny kind of how life works. I grew up with 2 lawyers as parents and said they had the most boring job in the world, and went to undergrad and got a criminal justice degree, and then went to law school to be part of the FBI, I thought. And then did an internship and did some civil litigation. Kind of got interested in that and thought that maybe civil litigation would be something I would like, and started at a firm, another firm here in St. Louis before Ohio, and my office was next to a gentleman that handled all the UPS litigation from Missouri, Iowa, and Southern Illinois. And so I got some exposure to the trucking industry, and the rest is kind of history. I've loved it. I love working with companies, and particularly with the drivers. And, I find a lot of purpose, a lot of meaning in getting them through some tough situations. And, I think what I pride myself on is I think that I bring value to all my motor carrier clients in terms of, since it's all I do, I think I bring a good knowledge base to them to help them prepare for losses, so that they don't lose their business and what they work for, and also getting their drivers through what can be very difficult situations. It's no fun to go get deposed by an aggressive and skilled plaintiff's attorney. And so I take a lot of pride in doing that.
Excellent. So you're strictly on the defense side.
Yeah. And in my world, you can't cross over. So yes, I am strictly on the defense side. Do not do any type of plaintiff's work at all. Strictly on the defense side.
Okay. And there was just a trucking event, wasn't there, for in the Midwest somewhere?
There was a what?
There was just a conference, I think, in Las Vegas on a trucking industry.
Yeah, there's a lot of them. So I'm a member of a couple of organizations. TIDA's the Trucking Industry Defense Association, DRI Trucking. I'm a member of. I'm also real active with our local, with 2 state associations, Missouri and Illinois. I actually sit on the board of the Missouri Trucking Association to try and help enact and guide with respect to some legal concepts, some tort reform concepts that can help the industry.
Yeah. I'm curious, what are the biggest concerns that you have when you go into litigation against an aggressive plaintiff attorney?
Yeah. So My world is really tough because trucks, as you probably know, and your listeners probably know, Jonathan, are heavily regulated. So it's not like a typical car accident that you or me may get in when we're driving on personal vehicles, where it's basically who is at fault, who is following the rules, and everyone kind of understands what the rules are for drivers, because most adults are drivers, at least particularly in the Midwest. I know up in the Northeast and some other parts, not everyone drives, but here everyone's a driver and everyone kind of understands what the rules of the road are. So when I get a case, one of the first things I do is look at, okay, on an initial impression, who did the police officer find at fault? Did they issue a citation? That's kind of where my investigation begins. But then it oftentimes has to go much further into, was my driver complying with what's called the hours of service? Because truckers can only drive and be on duty a certain amount of hours a day. What was the mechanical condition of my equipment? Was my driver taking his rest breaks? Did he have what's called a medical card that allows him to drive a commercial motor vehicle? Does he have the appropriate documentation for his commercial motor vehicle? If it was a hazardous load, if it was a wide load, then we have additional documentation. And so where a traditional car accident is, who is at fault based on state law, my cases are much more complex. And even in instances where at first blush, my truck driver doesn't appear to be at fault, there are still skilled plaintiffs lawyers that can make a liability case. And so I have to begin, throwing the proverbial kitchen sink at the wall myself to start investigating potential theories early on. And so it's a challenge.
It's very technical, isn't it? There's a lot of technical issues you got to
incredibly technical. And that's one of the reasons, again, I take pride in being exclusively dedicated to this practice, because I think it's dangerous to dabble in defending trucking claims, because there is so much knowledge that you need to have about the regulations. Immediately after an accident, when I get a call from a client and there's been a fatality, time's ticking. We have a certain amount of time to get our driver tested. We have a certain amount of time to locate electronic evidence on the truck that's going to be gone if someone turns on the truck or drives it. There's so much stuff that has to happen so quickly that I take a lot of pride in having that background and being able to effectively assist my clients. Because if you mess things up in those initial hours, initial days, initial weeks, it can add zeros to an exposure value on a case.
Yeah. What do you think the biggest risk is when you're defending a case? What do you worry about the most?
I think what every defense attorney worries about the most is some fact out there that you're not aware of that could impact your assessment. So I deal, a reality of my practice is I have a lot of cases that I have a significant amount of my practice involve cases where there's clear liability. We're gonna have some judgment issued against us. The question is how much, and helping my clients evaluate that exposure and deal with it. The thing that keeps me up at night is if I have missed something that's going to have an effect on what the appropriate risk allocation is for a given case that I've not reported on my client to, that I haven't made my client aware of, that I haven't investigated. That's the type of thing that I worry about on a daily basis. And so what I'm constantly doing and working with my team that I have here is looking at cases, what else do we need to look at? What other angle can we take from it? Based on, what plaintiff's doing, where do we think they're going with it? What do we think of that strategy? Could they pivot? And if they pivot, where could they go from this? Because of my experience, and again, getting to know some of the players, based on things like expert disclosures, I have a pretty good idea of where folks are going to go with their opinions and things like that. So it's constantly evaluating and reporting to my clients, and letting them know, hey, this is the risk that's out there, because I can't change the risk. The risk is already out there. What my job is to accurately report to my clients what those risk factors are, how they weigh for us or against us, and what actions we should take based on that.
Got it. So I would imagine you use expert witnesses, you use focus groups. I mean, how do you try to uncover those blind spots or those landmines?
You've hit the nail on the head, Jonathan. I mean, it's stepping outside of the defense lawyer perspective. It's, experts, absolutely. I mean, they're going to help you try to mitigate some of those risks. I commonly use, different consultants with background. If it's a regulatory case, if I know that we have an issue with compliance, we'll go retain someone that's a former DOT safety officer to do a full look at that. And that way, because I know a lot about the regulations, but I'm not an expert in it. So let's go hire an appropriate expert. And so, certainly trying to fill what I view as blind spots with folks that are experts in those fields to help me evaluate and assess the risk. And a huge risk factor that I think lawyers commonly underestimate is that we forget that a jury is going to be made up of 12 average people that may take a fact situation where we think everyone's focused to the left and they may focus to the right. And the only way that you figure that out is getting real people from the areas where you're going to be trying cases in a room, giving them the facts and letting them hash it out. And boy, are those results surprising sometimes.
Yeah. How many of your cases go to trial versus settle?
Very few of my cases go to trial. Very, very few. Oftentimes the cases that I deal with, unfortunately, they involve catastrophic loss. And so trial is a big gamble for plaintiff because oftentimes they need money to care for someone who's been hurt.
Yep.
Often a big gamble for my clients as well. The semi-trailers, tractor trailers on the road have to have at least $750,000 of insurance. There's very few trucks on the road with less than $1 million in insurance. And so it's a very high stakes, trial involves a lot of unknowns. And no one.
When you say high stakes, like what? Give me a magnitude, order of magnitude.
Well, it's at the end of the day, it's no one can make someone uninjured. So it's about dollars and cents. And so I'm sure you're aware and you've read headlines. I mean, we see billion-dollar verdicts now against trucking companies. $1 billion, not million, billion. And so my clients have reason to be concerned at different times about what types of exposure they may have. Those are outlier cases, candidly. Yep. I think in general, people understand the critical role that trucking plays in our country. And I don't see those types of results where I practice, and I practice in some jurisdictions that don't have the best reputation. So there's a lot of risk for my folks in terms of evaluating the case and figuring out how to best protect the trucking company. And again, like what I say for the plaintiffs in terms of high stakes is if they can get hundreds of thousands of dollars and know that they can take care of their loved one or themselves who's been hurt in an accident, it's hard to leave that money on the table and go to trial knowing that you may get a zero.
Right.
And so when those two factors intercede, you have a great recipe for negotiated outcomes where we may not love the outcome, the other side may not love the outcome, but it's an outcome that makes sense for everyone to move on from.
Got it. That makes sense. So let me ask you this. Sounds like you've worked on a lot of interesting cases. If you could think of one or maybe two, what's the most memorable case that you worked on?
Yeah. So I have the cases, it's hard. I mean, there's a number of cases that I describe as very memorable. There's one in particular that stands out, and it was probably 4 or 5 years ago, and parties' names I'll keep confidential, but it involved a wrongful death collision here in Missouri, and the trucking company was a small company. They were relatively unsophisticated, which meant that they had some issues with their what I call compliance with the hours of service, but they were good people. Our driver had issues with keeping his logbooks. He was a new person to have to actually keep his time. If drivers drive in a relatively short area, they don't have to keep their time. And so this gentleman, hardworking guy with a good family, had transitioned from where he was driving locally and didn't have to keep his hours to driving over the road where he had to keep his hours. And we had a good liability case. Based on accident testimony from witnesses, it looks like the car that the gentleman that unfortunately was killed was driving was probably at fault for the accident. But we had all of these other factors that we were dealing with. And, Jonathan, I spent a lot of time with that company, and that's what makes it memorable is that I worked with that company and with that driver for a number of occasions with depositions. And as we got very close to trial before it settled. And so that was a case for me where I really felt like I grew up as a trucking attorney. I learned a lot. I learned what it means to have some pretty bad compliance issues and how do you deal with that during the course of litigation. The other thing is it's one of my most memorable days as an attorney because I had a witness who was performing very poorly during a deposition, and during a break, I took him outside and read him his rights a little bit and said, hey, you're not sticking up for yourself, and you're getting walked all over, almost to the point where he started tearing up. He was a large man, 6'5", 350 pounds. And I almost had him crying outside during the deposition. And his deposition took all day, went 8 or 9 hours. And it was about a 3 or 4 hour drive home from me that night. And I'm driving home at 11 p.m. at night, and my phone rings, and it's that guy. It's my driver. And he calls me and he tells me, thanks for fighting your blank off today for me. And it's one of the most meaningful phone calls I've ever gotten in my practice, because he understood, even though he may not like what I'm saying to him at a particular time, that what I'm doing is I'm invested in his success and getting him and his company through this litigation. And even though he may not have liked me in the moment, at the end of the day, he knew that I was fighting for him. And that's meaningful to me, because that's where I get the joy from my practice is folks in the industry know that they have someone on their side, because they're so constantly attacked. The trucking industry is constantly under attack from numerous fronts. And so when I get calls from clients and they say, thank you for fighting for me, thank you for being passionate about the trucking industry and fighting for our business, that's where I get my joy from this work from. It's I'm blessed to make a good living as a lawyer, but my joy comes from those phone calls and those personal relationships that I have with folks.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. I mean, that's a common thread, because you're right. I mean, the compensation obviously is good and attractive, but I hear that often, that people really feel very passionate about helping people. And it's interesting. I've learned that that's a very common theme that I hear from most attorneys, which is great.
Yeah, it's something, I disagree a little bit with my plaintiff's attorney brethren on this, because they'll oftentimes say, the nameless, faceless insurance companies and defense counsel, and and I really get the same joy that I imagine a plaintiff's attorney gets from getting a good settlement for an injured person. I take a lot of joy in representing folks who I consider friends, that yes, their business is insurance and is risk, but it's still relationship building. Sure. And it's about helping others succeed that you have a common interest in. And the common interest is not cheating someone. The common interest is, when you've done wrong, paying a fair value for the value you've done wrong. When you're not responsible, limiting losses from things that you're not responsible for. And it's, if plaintiffs' attorneys are doing a good job and I'm doing a good job, that's when our system works the best. And that's what I'm here to do. And those relationships I form, because I do tend to be a passionate person, is where the joy comes from, for sure. I wouldn't do it if I didn't get that joy from it.
Yeah. I'm glad to hear that humanity coming through. We need more of that.
Yeah. And I, in most of my cases, I'm able to get along fairly well with plaintiffs' counsel, because I think our practice in our industry functions so much better when there's a recognition from both sides. But yeah, let's go passionately advocate for our clients. That doesn't mean trying to cheat. That doesn't mean being discourteous. That means doing our jobs to the best of our ability, because when we do that, and when two skilled lawyers approach a case from different angles, and you reach a negotiated outcome, or you get a verdict from a jury, that's our system. And that's what we do. And I think that zealous advocacy doesn't mean contentious or advocacy. I think it just means doing your job to the best way possible. And that's where clients get the most fair results, whether you're wearing a defense hat like I do, whether you're wearing a plaintiff's attorney hat like others do.
Got it.
So yeah, I do think there's a lot of humanity in the practice. Not everyone chooses to practice that way, unfortunately. It's how I like to practice, though.
Yeah, it's good stuff. Good stuff. So who is there any one or any book or anything that happened like that was the biggest influence, or that sort of influence you in your practice?
I think that I'm a product of so many different things. I think my biggest influences, obviously, I have two parents that are lawyers. And so, watching how from an early age, how they interacted with judges, with other lawyers, with things like that, kind of instructed, how I view opposing counsel and things like that. That
were they both on the defense side as well?
No. My mom was an appellate specialist, did a lot of briefing all on the defense side. My dad is a general litigation attorney and does probably mostly plaintiff's work, but also represents some businesses. So quite a diverse practice between them. So I definitely have pieces of them. And then, you know, I've kind of taken bits and pieces from different lawyers as I've grown up. I've been blessed at my prior firm and at my current firm to be around a lot of really, really good lawyers in both of those firms. And I think, you know, the one thing, the advice I give to young lawyers, the advice I try to take to heart is that you need to figure out how to practice law, how you're comfortable practicing law. And I think I've found that I'm very comfortable with how I practice and how I interact with other folks. And it's little bits and pieces of a lot of folks that I've had the opportunity to work with and that I work with now. I work with, I came over to Heil Royster to join Matt Heffelfinger, who leads our transportation group here. He's just got a ton of knowledge about trucking litigation and things like that. And the conversations that he and I have about strategy and analysis is just the kind of thing that I love in terms of my work and trying to get my client the best result, because it's in-depth, deep analysis. And that's, you know, and so I do take a lot of stuff from the folks I have the pleasure to know all over the country. I've been incredibly blessed to meet lawyers all over the country that do trucking work that I consider friends that I can call and talk about cases with. And I even have friends on the plaintiff side that I call and talk about cases with and to get their input. And so
I would think that would make you a better attorney if you get the other side of it too, right?
yeah, and it's, you know, and Jonathan, those folks have started to call me back from time to time, and they say, hey, I got a case, you know, let me ask your defense input, and that means a lot to me. So I think I've taken a lot of little things from other people, but at the end of the day, you know, whether it's my faith, whether it's my upbringing, you know, how I handle myself, how I practice is motivated by how I view my role in this world and what I want others to think about me. You know, I want my clients to think that I'm a fighter for them. I want them to understand that I care about them. I want opposing counsel to think when they have a case with me that he's going to fight hard, but he's going to fight fair. And we're going to do this in a respectful manner, and we might even have a little bit of fun while we do it, because we're going to spend a lot of time doing it, so we might as well have a little fun. So those are the things, you know, I've taken bits and pieces from a whole lot of folks that I've been blessed to work with, and if I started naming them, I would leave people off.
Yeah, that's okay.
Because there's so many, and just honestly, the question, I mean, the names that are coming to my mind, I mean, there's so many great lawyers that I've had the opportunity to work with that have taken time to mentor me, and you know, I hope I have that effect on other folks.
It sounds like you will. I can tell.
I appreciate that. I hope so.
Yeah. So let me ask you a question. Since this is sponsored by EmotionTrac, you know, and legal tech, what's your view on technology in the legal space? And are you guys using it? And where do you think it's going to go?
So my view on technology in the legal space is it's critical, absolutely critical. And I think as lawyers, we owe it to our clients to stay abreast of what is a rapidly changing field. And one of the main issues that I deal with in my practice, Jonathan, is helping trucking companies understand, hey, this is what's out there, but understand that you can't manage, you know, if you go out and get all this data, if you don't have the time to manage it, it's not going to help your safety program. It's not going to be an effective tool for you. And so similar to that, in terms of a law firm practice, lawyers have to be able to use technology to their advantage. It makes our lives more efficient. My clients, my defense clients who are paying me hourly, expect that I'm going to be efficient with my time. Yep. They expect that I'm going to understand and use the technology that's available to me, both in terms of giving them a good result on their cases and also limiting the time I spend doing things and looking for information and two, in practice management. I mean, I think lawyers have to understand how technology plays a critical role in the practice, what you can do to make your practice more efficient, what you can do to, from the business aspect, improve your firm and your practice, because there's a lot of folks that depend on us for feeding their kids and things like that. So technology is essential. It's changing with great companies like you guys that are constantly evolving, and you got to be on top of it. You got to pay attention to it. And if you're not doing that, it's a recipe to be significantly less successful than those that are.
Yeah. No, it's interesting. I mean, some of the larger, I don't know how big your firm is, but some of the big firms like the AM Law 100, I know they have a dedicated group to innovation, which is interesting in itself, right? And they're constantly exploring new technologies and how to get more efficient and how to get smarter with their casework.
Right. And, there's a little bit of, I guess kind of a funny example is, if you come in my office, I'm pretty much paperless. I'm 99% paperless. You could go down the hall and I can't even walk in there. I get stressed out. There's just paper everywhere.
Yeah.
And so,
it's an age thing, right?
Yeah,
Generation.
I think folks like me, and what I try to convince some of my more seasoned practitioners is, look, if you do it digitally, you just have to carry around a laptop and everything's there for you.
Yes.
And
listen, I can't even get my wife to use an electronic calendar. So trust me, she's still writing stuff down on paper.
My wife's the same way, Jonathan. It's funny. She teaches a college course on technology, but still keeps a paper calendar.
Yeah.
And so it really is, I think it's critical. I'm constantly challenging leadership. How can we become more efficient? How can we utilize technology better? How can we look at our performance as lawyers from a business perspective better? How can we better serve our clients with technology?
Excellent. Yeah, excellent.
What type of databases are out there? What type of tools to organize our files are out there? What type of finance? I mean, there's just so much out there that I wish we aren't big enough to have the luxury of someone full-time dedicated to it. But I understand
you sharing that. I can see the future.
Yeah, well, and if I was if my firm was as big as an AM 100 firm, I understand why they do it. I think it makes total sense. It's just like, back in the old days, Ford or GM looking to improve their efficiencies at their plant and having a team that was like, oh, if we put this lift in, this person can speed up their work by 5 seconds. And if we speed up at 5 seconds, we produce 100,000 more cars a year. I mean, it's the same, it's the same concept, just with technology. And so, I think the struggle for younger lawyers is convincing, again, some of our more seasoned folks that yes, there is an investment for some of this stuff.
Yeah.
That the investment can pay dividends, just like it has, during the course of history. It's just technology is less fungible than some of those other things.
Yeah. No, I listen, I think in general, the struggle between the new generation, older generation is everywhere, right?
Yeah.
You're fighting innovation versus it's hard to change, right? So
right.
Yeah, I see that in the industry, but it's interesting. I mean, you can definitely see the introduction of a lot of technology. AI is everywhere, and it's interesting. I mean, you got to use it correctly and use it in a way that it's going to add value. But yeah, I think you can't really stop it. It's going to happen.
Yeah, and I think the challenge for businesses, whether you're a law firm, whether you're a private company, whether you're a trucking company, is what's out there and how do we use it effectively? Because if you just choose to ignore it, you're going to be eating dust of the folks that are constantly evaluating how to use it. You can't, sitting on the sidelines isn't an option.
I like the attitude.
Yeah, sitting on the sidelines is not an option. You got to be in the game. You may stub your toe a time or two, but you got to constantly be innovating. You're never staying the same. You're getting better, getting worse every minute of every day.
You sound like you were an athlete. I mean, it sounds like you got to be in the field. You must have played sports at some time in your life.
I did. I played baseball through college. I was actually a 4-sport athlete in high school. So yeah, I strained my neck getting out of bed this week, so I don't feel like I'm still an athlete. But I was at one point, and I've transitioned to golf and
there you go. Me too.
Front yard basketball instead of basketball on the court.
There you go. Yeah. That's excellent. No, it's in your head, you probably still think you're 20 years old and you can still do the same things you could, but
still think that way. And that's why I like being a lawyer. Contested depositions and hearings and things, you still get a little bit of that.
It translates well, doesn't it? The competition. Yeah, absolutely.
Yep. Still get a little bit of that adrenaline rush that I think all athletes and ex-athletes are always looking for.
Absolutely. I do have a bias in business. I do like athletes because I like the teamwork. I like the competitive spirit. And I think it translates really well into the business world.
Yeah, you're not alone. Whenever I'm looking at candidates and things like that, I always want to know about that past history, because I totally agree with you. I think that that athletics and teamwork in the past are a good indicator for what's ahead.
Excellent. Excellent. I agree. Well, listen, I will wrap it up here. This has been really interesting conversation. What's the easiest way if somebody wants to get in touch with you?
Yeah, easiest way to get in touch with me is email lhall, so LHALL at HeylRoyster.com, HeylRoyster.com. The second and probably best way to get a hold of me is my cell phone, 314-702-3499. If you call my office phone, it just bounces to my cell phone anyway, so you might as well just call my cell phone. So being a guy that advocates and works for the trucking industry 24/7, 365 for my clients. And so I'm always available as needed, because that's what my clients deserve and that's what they get from me. So.
Excellent. Well, listen, thanks again for Larry Hall spending some time with us here today. And again, thanks to our sponsor, EmotionTrac. That's a C, not a K. And we use artificial intelligence to glean emotions that people use for casework, for trials and mediations. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Jonathan.
You bet.